Hello, and welcome to the public meeting of the DC Lodge. I'm so glad you could join us today. And before I introduce our speaker, I'll invite you all to read the invocation loud to strengthen the vibration. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May all who feel themselves as one with thee know they are therefore one with every other. So I am so happy to welcome today a special guest, Kathryn Gann. She's the president of the Theosophical Order of Service. She has been a student of Theosophy since 1994. She has served in various leadership positions within the Theosophical Society, including several terms within the Theosophical Society, as secretary of the Denver Theosophical Society, 12 years on the board of the directors of the TSA, including a term as vice president, and several years as secretary and board member of the Theosophical Order of Service. As I said, she's presently the president of the TOS, and she lives in beautiful and currently cold Denver, Colorado. So, Kathy, it's all yours.
Thanks very much, Suzanne. I'm going to share my screen and do a PowerPoint today, but before I do that, I want to make one point and make sure I cover this before I forget. And that is, a lot of people don't know that if you are a TSA member, you are automatically a member of the TOS in the USA. So there's no worry about how do I join the TOS. If you're a TSA member, you're already a member of the TOS. So with that, I am going to share my screen. And I want to start just by talking. I want to cover 3 points today. First, we're going to talk about how and why the TOS came into existence. Second, we're going to talk about what the TOS has been doing over the years. That'll be the bulk of the presentation. And third, we're going to talk a little bit at the end about why a person would want to participate in the TOS. So as to how and why the TOS came into existence, a lot of people don't know that it has a somewhat similar origin as the TS. We all know the stories about how the Theosophical Society came into existence, that it was the brainchild of those evolved people that we call the Masters of the Wisdom. They worked with Madame Blavatsky, Colonel Olcott, William Quan Judge, and others to form the society. A lot of people don't know that the TOS was actually formed and its inspiration was a letter from one of the Masters of the Wisdom. It was received by a TS member sometime, I want to say in the 1880s. We don't know who the TS member was, and it's just as well. We don't even know who wrote the letter, but there is a writing by Madame Blavatsky at Adyar certifying that the letter was written by a Master of the Wisdom. The first part of the letter is a little bit embarrassing for the member, which is why that member's identity was protected. It was a bit of a castigation because he had taken it into his head that as a TS member, he somehow had the right to judge other people. So the first part of the letter set him straight, but it's the second part of the letter that is important and is of historical significance. In that part of the letter, the master said, look, the true purpose of the Theosophical movement in the world is to reduce suffering. We might say, if somebody asked you what the purpose was, you might say it's to further the evolution and speed up the evolution of humanity and life on Earth. And that would be true, but why do we have an interest in speeding up evolution? What's wrong with evolution at the normal speed? My answer to that would be because evolution can be painful. Not every moment, of course, is painful. There are wonderful moments involved in being an incarnation, but often being an incarnation and going through our evolutionary lessons is painful. It's painful for people on the other side of the planet. It's painful for your loved ones and your neighbors, and it's often painful for you. So that is why it is the most merciful thing we can think of to speed up evolution and enlighten humanity as quickly as possible. We do that to reduce suffering. At its heart, the whole purpose of the Theosophical movement is to reduce suffering. And we do that by becoming enlightened and learning our lessons and learning about the world and how it works as quickly as we can. So this letter that was received, and you'll see some of the text from it in just a minute, but this letter said essentially that Theosophy has to be more than a bunch of nice talk. It can't just be showing up and listening to a nice lecture here and there. It can't be just reading it or discussing it or thinking about it. It has to be put into action. Theosophy has to be made practical. If you do that, just by making Theosophy practical and living the wisdom teachings rather than just studying them, two things will happen. One, suffering in your area will be reduced. And two, you yourself will enjoy a good deal of spiritual progress. So those are two amazing promises that were made by this letter. Annie Besant later, in probably 1907, she was studying this letter. And you'll see in the video that I'm about to play that she founded the TOS in the early months of 1908. So the little slideshow that I put together is first going to start by giving you a little bit of a flavor of 1908, and then it'll go into the historical founding of the TOS. So here we go. We'll roll tape. Oh.
Picture it, 1908 was a leap year in more ways than one. The year was celebrated with the first ever dropping of a lighted ball in Times Square. Toes were tapping to Billy Murray's new song, Good Evening, Carolina.
Good evening, Carolina, never saw you looking finer.
For fashionable ladies, big hats were hot. For the gents, big feet apparently were not. Dutch artist Piet Mondrian found Theosophy, the Chicago Cubs won the World Series, and the Summer Olympic Games were held in London. In Madras, India, 60-year-old Annie Besant presided as international president of the Theosophical Society, and she earnestly studied her teacher's admonition that Theosophy had to be made practical. Captivated by the idea that Theosophy, put into practical action, could reduce the sum of human misery in the world, Annie Besant created the Theosophical Order of Service, whose mission was to unite all who love in the service of all that suffers. Mrs. Besant knew that people work at their highest capacity when they feel a genuine passion for the cause, so various leagues were formed within the TOS. There was the Braille League, the Esperanto League, a League for Daily Meditation, League for the Abolition of Vivisection, League of Healers, Poor Children's Clothing League, the Education League. There was an Art League and a Temperance League.
Okay, well, you get the idea. If you could dream up a type of project or a type of service to do, there was probably a league for it. And there was no such thing as going viral in 1908, but this came as close as you could get within the Theosophical world of going viral. In other words, it spread like wildfire around the world. There were TOS sections almost wherever there were TS sections in the world, and there still are. So this was wildly popular, and many, many leagues were formed. Soon they needed to come up with some sort of hierarchical organization to keep the organization running. And so in the United States, a member by the name of Max Wardall, can you see my cursor? Hopefully you can. Max Wardall was a very popular and charismatic speaker for the TS, just a very well-liked member. He was affectionately known as Mr. Max. He became the first secretary of the TOS in the United States. He was also the first international secretary of the TOS. So he had both of those jobs while maintaining a marriage, raising 2 children, and working full-time to support his family. So Mr. Max was very busy. Here's Max Wardall with, as you see, a very young Krishnamurti and his business manager, Mr. Rajagopal, and of course, Annie Besant. This was taken in the United States on the rooftop, kind of a garden terrace of a hotel in Chicago. I don't know what year that was, but Max Wardall served as the first secretary from 1926 to 1933. Unfortunately, but not surprisingly, I guess, he fell ill around 1930 from exhaustion and overwork. He didn't really recover and he passed away in 1933. So you can imagine between his death and the Great Depression that had settled in, things were kind of quiet in the TOS for a year or two. But then in 1934 or 35, Robert Logan took over as the head of the TOS in the United States, and he had a passion for animal welfare. So the wearing of fur was very popular in those days, and there was already a type of fake fur or faux fur called Humanifur. So Robert Logan and his wife were quite wealthy. They could have easily afforded all the furs they wanted. They wore Humanifur, and they advocated for it and tried to get everybody to switch over to wearing Humanifur. These scrapbooks that you see were located in the archives at Olcott at our National Center at the TSA. And they are said to be very well organized, very detailed, put together well. He would use these as a basis to try to convey to people the horror and the agony and the suffering that was experienced by animals raised in the fur trade. So Humanifur was his big project. He was assisted throughout the Great Depression by two very energetic ladies. Of course, I didn't know them, but I love these ladies, Edith Lee Ruggles and Blanche Kilbourne. Mostly the TOS consisted of activism at that time in the form of writing to your politicians about various causes of the day, one of which you see pictured here. It was called the Carver Diving Horse Act, where horses were trained with a rider on board to go up this very tall platform and then jump off the platform into a tank of water. Here you see this horseback rider is female. This is a woman on horseback. Now I want to point something out. Look, right here is the shoulder level of the onlookers. Do you see the tank? I don't see the tank. So how deep could that tank of water have been if we don't see the top of it? And what must the injuries to the horses and the riders have been? It's unthinkable, just a horrific form of entertainment. And so one of the things that they protested was the Carver Diving Horse Act. They also worked for the abolishment of capital punishment. They worked for anti-lynching legislation. They protested the import of monkeys from India to the US for the purposes of vivisection. And they would publish these suggestions in every issue of the American Theosophist magazine. Every issue had more and more and more appeals. And in one of the issues, Blanche wrote to the members, "The test of sincerity of one's beliefs is action in support of them. Let's be doers, not readers only." To which I can only say, you go, Blanche. I agree with her 100%. Let's put it into action. Here's somebody you recognize, a very young Joy Mills. This is Joy in 1943. She remembers a couple different projects that took place during the 1940s, during the World War II years. One of them was called the European Parcel Project, where all the members or all the staff members that worked at Olcott in those days both lived and worked in the main building. So after they had their dinner at night, they would stay in the dining hall and they would pack boxes, think about grocery-sized boxes of donated items, maybe warm clothing, basic food, personal items, things like that. And they would send them to TS members in Europe who had been displaced or adversely affected by World War II. They would get the names either from TOS in England or from the heads of other European sections. And then there was a pen pal program that Joy herself participated in. She remembers this very fondly. The US service members, TS members who served abroad in the war, were obviously very young people, and they were teamed up with young Theosophists here at home. And so they would carry on letter correspondence. It was a pen pal program. And along with the letters, once in a while, a pamphlet would be sent. There were a series of 4 pamphlets that would be sent to the service members serving abroad, just kind of bucking them up and inspiring them to keep going. And Joy remembers this quite well. So there was another project that I can't find very much about. I can't find anything on the internet about it. So I think maybe it never grew legs and went anywhere, but I just have to hand it to the workers in the TOS at that time, because this was pretty cutting edge. It was called the Olcott Weavers. It was started by the head of the handicraft department. The TOS by that time had shifted from leagues to departments. And so the head of the handicraft department recognized that soldiers returning from war with a little known and little understood condition, then called shell shock or jungle fatigue. Today we recognize this as PTSD, and it's much better understood. He understood that craft work and arts were very therapeutic. They had therapeutic value if people could work on just arts and crafts projects while they were in the hospital recuperating from their physical injuries. The arts and crafts somehow helped them and was therapeutic for their psychological and emotional traumas as well. He even proposed that a national weaving guild should be formed to help veterans learn crafts and re-enter the workforce. But like I said, I can't find anything about it on the internet, so I don't think it ever really took off. But I do think that we can be kind of proud of our little TOS was doing something that was cutting edge at the time. Of course, these days, art therapy is well recognized as a treatment for PTSD. Now, the TOS was active in the 1950s and 60s, but just in the interest of time, we're going to zoom forward to 1979 because that was the year a project started, and it was a TOS project, and it became something really big that I'll show you. Some of you know Floyd Kettering. You see where my cursor is. This is Floyd in 2018. And Floyd is currently serving as the national treasurer of the Theosophical Society in America. This is, let's see, up here is a 1979 Floyd Kettering, and this is his wife, Carol, who passed away quite a number of years ago. But in 1979, Carol started this project in her garage as a TOS project. It was coming up on Christmas time, and Carol knew that there were quite a number of households in their area, and they lived in the area of Olcott, the National Center. She knew that a lot of people lived in food insecure households. They didn't have enough to eat. And that just broke her heart, especially to think that older people would not have enough to eat around the holidays. So she took in donations, filled their garage with donations, and then distributed those goods to food insecure households in the area of the National Center in Wheaton, Illinois. The next year, the project was bigger. It grew until it outgrew their garage. It moved into the basement dining hall of Olcott. It grew until it outgrew the dining hall at Olcott. They've gone through about 3 different buildings. Here you see them in one of the warehouse rooms at their current location. I think this is their 3rd building that they're in, and they're outgrowing this, from what I understand. At some point, it became its own 501c3. It's called the Humanitarian Service Project. As I said, Carol sadly passed away a number of years ago, but Floyd still spends, I think, most of his waking hours running HSP. Today, HSP has 3 programs. The Children's Project, which is essentially rather like a birthday party in a bag for children whose families can't afford to buy them a birthday present, probably can't even afford to buy something as frivolous as a cake mix. So they, in a bag, they get a present, a cake mix, frosting, a little prepared frosting, some party favors, and inexpensive decorations. So it's a birthday party in a bag. They still have a senior citizen project and the Christmas offering for food insecure households. In 2018 at the SNC, we had a choice of several different service projects. So here's a delegation from the SNC. We went over to the Humanitarian Service Project, and we filled bags, grocery bags, with food that would then be distributed to household. Well, here's me. Here's our current TSA president, Doug Keene. And you can see we had some very youthful volunteers as well. So it was a fun day. And a lot of the people who live around Olcott and work at Olcott still go to HSP very regularly and volunteer there. In 2008, Betty Bland was president of the Theosophical Society, and she did something kind of different. She led a delegation of members to a tour of Tibet. The tour guide was Glenn Mullen, who still lectures for the TS on topics related to Buddhism. He is a professional tour guide, and he knows his way around Tibet to the extent that he can get people into places that other people probably couldn't. So a few TS members got to go along with Betty Bland and David Bland. One of the things they did was they visited the Chushul orphanage in Tibet, and they they went bearing gifts. I think in 2008, they took boxes and boxes full of Crocs, you know, the colorful shoes that we have here in America. Well, there was no other way these kids were ever going to get their hands on any Crocs. So they took armloads of Crocs in, and the kids got to wear Crocs. In 2009, Tim Boyd led a similar trip. Here you see Tim, and one of the members present was Olivia Hanson, and I believe there was a member of the Washington, D.C. Lodge. Was there someone named Volodka, I think, got to go on the 2009 trip? And so Olivia remembers her very fondly. They
Yes.
also took,
She's
yeah.
here.
Oh, wonderful. Volodka, you probably remember Olivia, and of course you
Yes.
remember Tim.
Yes.
So long story short, the TOS fell in love with the orphanage and adopted just the whole orphanage, hook, line, and sinker. Tim Boyd immediately began to raise funds. They raised about $30,000 to build a new bathhouse, which you see going up here. The house was nice enough, but it didn't really have adequate bathroom or bathing or shower facilities. And so the $30,000 was enough to put up a proper bathhouse. It was completed. Unfortunately, the Chinese government closed the Chushul orphanage and relocated the children to Chinese institutional schools in 2013. The last thing we heard is that all of the children from Chushul were moved together to the same place to try to lessen the trauma, but that was the last we heard. So whether they were able to stay together, I don't know, and I wasn't able to find anything on the internet. I put this in just to show the diversity of projects that the TOS has participated in over the years. In 2015, we supported a program called Mushrooms in Ghana. Now here in the upper right, you see a lot of the farmers in Ghana, and notice that most of them are women. There's a man here and a boy here, but a lot of the farmers in Ghana are women. And in the background, you see this lush greenery. There is no problem growing food in Ghana. It's lush and green, and there's plenty to eat. The problem was that the lower income population could not afford quality protein, and so they were suffering from protein deprivation, essentially protein starvation. So this young man, Bernard Bempa, came up with a plan whereby he would teach farmers in Ghana to raise mushrooms. Oyster mushrooms are 10% protein, shiitake mushrooms are 18% protein. So they're very cheap to buy. And so once the farmers started producing these mushrooms, people could buy these good protein sources very cheaply. You can chop up the proteins and the mushrooms, put them in whatever else they were cooking for their meals. And it was easy then for them to get some good quality protein. The farmers benefited as well. They saw their revenues increase. I think it was something like 2 to 4 times what it had been. So this was a win-win all around. And we love this kind of program. This model of helping is called a hand up, not a handout. This is where the help comes from within. They could just use a little bit of a financial boost to help them get their programs going. So we were really pleased to be able to provide some funding and participate in this. This came to our attention by a member. So when you're out there in your travels, if you become familiar with an organization and you know they're doing really good work, come and tell us at the TOS if you'd like to see the TOS support them. It could be that they will get a grant from the TOS. At least let us know so that we can make a decision. One of the pillars of TOS support for quite a long time has been Native American support, and particularly, I think, because of personal relationships that existed between TOS members and people at a particular reservation. There's been a particular relationship between the TOS and the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation and the Rosebud Indian Reservation. Both of those are in the southwestern corner of South Dakota. On the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, there is a school of nursing called the Oglala Lakota College School of Nursing. And for years and years, we gave scholarships to a third-year student who was showing a propensity for giving back to her community, his or her community. And so we let the school pick the recipient, but it had to be somebody in their third year and somebody who the school was confident wanted to use their nursing degree to give back to their community. There were many recipients, but this is just one of them, Christina Ironcloud. For some reason, the school at some point just a few years ago stopped being able to accept scholarships. I'm unclear exactly what happened or why they can no longer receive our scholarships. We would still be giving scholarships if we could, but they can no longer accept them. And it felt to me, at least, like that kind of, it was like there was a hole in my heart. It kind of left a hole in our Native American funding. Although for younger students, we've been for years supporting the Lakota Waldorf School. We discovered years ago that right geographically in the middle of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation is, I always say it's a brilliant light in the heart of Pine Ridge, is a Waldorf school, which, as you probably know, is a theosophical model of school founded by Theosophist Rudolf Steiner in Germany. Of course, you know that he broke away from the Theosophical Society and formed the Anthroposophical Society, where he founded Waldorf education, biodynamic farming, there's anthroposophical medicine, there's a form of dance called eurythmy, all manner of practical things. In other words, bringing the theosophical and wisdom teachings down to a very human level where they can be put into practical action. So for example, here in the lower right-hand corner, you see the children growing their own produce, which is not only organic, but they're actually using biodynamic agriculture principles to grow as much food as they can for their school. Of course, it's very cold there in the winter, so they don't grow food year round. They bring groceries in, but the children are learning to grow their own produce. Part of the problem in Pine Ridge is, well, very much unmet medical needs. There is rampant diabetes, rampant heart disease, depression, despair, a very, very high suicide rate, to the extent that right now, today, in this day and age, the average life expectancy for a man on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation is 47 years of age. For a woman, it's 52. That's partly because of the health is so poor, partly because of the suicide rate. The health is poor because the food choices are poor, and that's because there's 80 to 85% unemployment on Pine Ridge. Pine Ridge is home to several counties, some of which are the poorest in the United States. So if you want to know where poverty is worst in the United States, it is on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. So to have this light-filled institution come in and show these kids a better way. These kids are growing up with all these wonderful wisdom teachings from the Waldorf educational model, which meshes beautifully with the traditional Lakota values. Waldorf is very flexible, and so it meshes just perfectly and beautifully with the traditional Lakota values. So they're pursuing a Waldorf method of education, but they're doing it in a very culturally appropriate way for the Lakotas. It just looks like it's all kinds of fun. And here you see the kids doing something in a circle. You see how big and pretty this room is. They've been able to build a new building. They had been just crowded into this very small rectangular little structure. I think it had been a 2-bedroom home. And now they have this big, beautiful building. If the families had to pay private tuition for this education, they would have exactly 0 students. This school runs entirely on donations and grants. And so this is just one of the great delights for me in working with the TOS, is that we get to support, in part, the Lakota Waldorf School. All right. This is a photograph taken at Pine Ridge by a National Geographic photographer by the name of Aaron Huey. He very kindly granted me permission to use some of his photographs for TOS purposes. One of the major problems on Pine Ridge is a housing shortage. You will find 3 to 4 families crowded together in one small house. By small house, I mean it's a basic rectangular box. It has probably 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, and you'll find 3 to 4 families. And families on Pine Ridge are not small. They probably have 4 to 5 children each. And there may be multiple generations, so there may be elders as well as parents and children. Think of 3 to 4 families in a 2-bedroom house. And this is life on Pine Ridge as it really is. Aaron was taken in and became friends, became as much of an insider as you can at Pine Ridge without without being Native American. And so right now today, just on the Pine Ridge Reservation alone, they are short 20,000 houses. 20,000 houses short. Not that that's the total number of houses there, that's how many they're short. And so that leads as a segue into a project I'm very excited about. This has not been announced yet. You are hearing it here first. One of the solutions that we are happy to support is a dome home. These are 2-story tiny houses, essentially, made out of cellular concrete. It's a low-cost, hyper-efficient, indestructible home. The cellular concrete is super insulative. It's 80% air. And so once you form this structure out of the cellular concrete, you've got both your structure and your insulation. It doesn't need any more insulation, doesn't need any drywall on the inside. It is finished and you can just paint it. This one that you see is not yet painted. They get painted very colorfully inside and out. One of the problems on Pine Ridge is tornadoes and gale force winds. These are impervious to that. They will not get knocked down by tornadoes. Black mold is another particular problem at Pine Ridge. These are impervious to mold and rot, pests and insect, and you can't light one on fire if you tried. You cannot light them on fire. So they're perfectly fireproof. They started out building these in 16-foot diameters. They've now increased them to 20-foot diameters. This was the brainchild and an invention specifically for Pine Ridge by this guy, Aaron, and this guy, Jason. I had quite a long conversation with Jason in deciding to support this project. All TOS projects are carefully vetted. So when you donate to the TOS, you know that the money is going to projects that have been well vetted by the board of directors. And now I'm going to show you the inside of these. Is that cute? I love this. This is again a little 2-story tiny house. So here's a little sleeping area. Here's your kitchen. Here's a dining area. And then if you could see in the foreground, there's a spiral staircase leading to the 2nd floor where there are additional sleeping areas and a full-size family bathroom. Now, I said earlier that families on Pine Ridge are not small, and that's true, but these dome homes can be connected by corridors. So for example, you could have 2 dome homes. Maybe one is all sleeping area and the other is the living area, something like that. So this is just getting started. There are 3 dome homes that have been built. 3 more will be built this summer, and we're going to help support that. The foundations have already been laid for them, and they will go up summer of 2024. Another problem, as I said, the poverty is so bad because of an 80 to 85% unemployment rate on Pine Ridge. It's a major problem. And so this man, Henry Red Cloud, he is a chief. He's not the chief, but he is a chief of the Lakota people. He's doing everything he can to solve as many problems as he can while he's in incarnation. Henry is the great-great-grandson of the original Chief Red Cloud. You can look him up on Wikipedia. He's the one that signed the treaty with the US government to move the Lakota people onto reservations in the first place. So it was Henry's great-great-grandfather who did that. Somebody asked Henry once, what would your great-great-grandfather think if he could see life on the reservation today? And Henry said he would cry. He would just cry. And I think that's true. Remember that in the 1800s, before white settlers came west, the Lakota people were warriors. Young men were warriors. And so look at this guy's t-shirt. Now they are solar warriors, and they are learning the solar installation industry. So Red Cloud Renewable, run by Henry and his son, will train any tribe member from any tribe in the United States. They've had people come from Alaska, for example. They have programs for men and for women. And these people are learning the solar installation industry, which, if you think about it, this is a green and growing industry. These jobs probably cannot be outsourced. And at least at this time, as far as I know, they could not be replaced by AI. So when they complete a 3 or 5 week program, they go away with a level 1 federal certification. And so these young people are immediately employable in the solar industry. Henry is also, Red Cloud Renewable is also planting as many trees as they can on Pine Ridge. They've planted 250,000 trees so far, and they will be planting another 24,000 this spring in 2024. So they're just doing some incredible work, and we are also partnering with them, giving them a grant to help their work. I'm really, really excited about both of these projects at Pine Ridge. Okay, this is one of my favorites. Beagle Freedom Project is an organization started not that many years ago by a lady who is an attorney. She practices in the area of animal rights. I didn't even know that that was a legal specialty, but she's an animal rights lawyer. She started the Beagle Freedom Project, which is in the business of rescuing animals that have been used by laboratories, but there comes a point for every animal when the laboratory is finished with it. I leave that to your imagination as to what that might mean. But for the longest time, the industry standard was that when they were finished with an animal, they simply euthanized it. Even if it was in relatively good health, they would just euthanize it. So Beagle Freedom Project offers to go get those animals that they're finished with. So they rescue animals that the labs are finished with. They started by writing a letter to every single lab in the United States. They said, look, when you're done with the animal, call us, we'll come and get them. We don't care when, we don't care where, you just call us and we'll be there, and we'll take those animals and we'll rehabilitate them, we'll make them healthy again. And if possible, we will get them adopted into families so that they can, at least the latter part of their lives will be nice. Finally, they got a taker, and the lab insisted that the transfer take place in the dead of night. So it was about 9 or 10 p.m. They didn't want anybody in the neighborhood to see what was happening. And Beagle Freedom Project always guarantees the anonymity of the labs. If they didn't do that, no rescues would take place. Literally, both sides were on ladders. There was a chain link fence with lab employees on ladders on one side, rescuers on ladders on the other side, and then literally handed the dogs over the chain link fence to the waiting rescuers, who put them in crates in the back of their vehicles and get them to a place where they can turn them loose for the first time in their lives. And so in one of the early rescues, a lady who worked at the lab, I'm sure very well-intentioned, said to the rescuers, you know, what you're doing isn't going to work. This isn't going to work because these animals have been in cages their whole lives, and so their legs will have atrophied. You think this is going to work, but it's not going to work. Well, to her credit, she went along and watched as the animals were turned loose. And this is what happens when you turn a laboratory animal loose on grass for the first time. And so there's a lot of logistics involved in these rescues, because you not only need the rescuers and the crates and the vehicles, you need a place to turn them loose. So sometimes it might be somebody's backyard. It might be a big room in a veterinarian clinic, depending on the weather. But thus far, this has grown and grown and grown. They have rescued more than 3,000 animals. It isn't just beagles and it isn't just dogs. 36 states and 8 countries. Because the founder is a lawyer, they're also working to change legislation. So far, they've had success in 13 states, and they're continuing to work. In those 13 states, it is now mandated by law that when a lab is finished experimenting on an animal, they must give the animal over to a rescue organization. Doesn't have to be Beagle Freedom, but a rescue organization. They've also had some luck modernizing some of the federal laws, including the FDA Modernization Act. It was the FDA back in 1938 that mandated that any drug that's going to be marketed for humans had to first be tested on animals. I don't know exactly what the Modernization Act entails, and it is not putting an end entirely to animal experimentation, but it's a partial solution. It's a step in the right direction, and it is eliminating some animal experimentation. So Beagle Freedom Project is near and dear to my heart. Oh, I wanted to tell you why it is that beagles are the most frequently selected animal for experimentation in laboratories. It's because of their friendly and docile nature. No matter what you do to a beagle, it will not bite you or snap at you. And so unfortunately, as they say, sometimes no good deed goes unpunished, and beagles are most frequently used in animal experimentation. Here's kind of a timeline of a rescue. First thing is to transport the animals away from the lab in safety. Unfortunately, that needs to be done in crates. They need to be in cages just a little bit longer. But then they get taken somewhere and they're turned loose for the first time. This is what happens. Number 3, this was a rescue that took place in Las Vegas. They get to run and play, and boy, do they catch on quickly. They romp and frolic with each other. They learn to play with tennis balls and toys and treats really fast. Of course, the rescuers don't know what was done to the animals, so they don't know what dreaded disease or substance might have been injected into the animal. And so veterinarian care is clearly the first step. They've got to get these animals as healthy as they can. The animals are then put into foster homes where they are trained to be part of a family. They don't know about going to the door and barking to be let out. They don't know about jumping up on a couch for cuddling, and they don't know about being petted. In their minds, human beings are to be feared. So there's a transition, but boy, do they catch on fast, really, really fast. And so eventually, as soon as the animal is ready, they are adopted into forever homes. And once in a while, there is what they call a foster fail, and that sounds like a negative thing, but it's where the foster family falls so in love with the dog that they end up adopting the dog permanently. All right, you know that the TOS has 2 healing networks, one for people and one for animals. Here is a very old, and I'm sorry, but kind of low quality photograph of the Healing Circle doing a healing ceremony at Olcott, our national center for the TSA. Here you see Tim Boyd a number of years ago. These ceremonies, if you don't know, were designed by Jeffrey Hodson, who was an author and lecturer earlier in the Theosophical Society. He passed away in the 1980s. Jeffrey was a clairvoyant, and he designed these healing ceremonies to be a cooperative effort between the human kingdom and the angelic or Devic kingdom. So when you are doing these ceremonies, these healing ceremonies, you are actually invoking angelic or Devic cooperation and participation. If you have never had a chance to participate in one of these, all I can tell you is this is not imagination. This is not hokum. It is not hocus pocus. This is powerful. The energy that is generated is very real. It's powerful, and it is deeply, deeply sacred. And there are success stories that abound, people whose names have been put into the network and have recovered. And sometimes they really feel that the energy that was transmitted to them has been helpful. Of course, you know that there is an animal healing network that was founded by your very own Rosie Eulich. Not only the name of the animal, but the names of the humans who care for them go into the network. Recognizing that when our pets are hurting, we're hurting. And so it is a network where you can put the names of the animals and their caretakers. Here you see Darby. She was a very sweet dog who lived here in Denver. Her human grandma, Joyce, had served on the board of directors of the TOS. She's part of our Denver group. Darby came to a point where her vets and her family didn't think that she would live much longer. She was very sick. Her name was placed into the Animal Healing Network, and Darby began to recover. Eventually, she had another 2 years of quality life with her human family, and her grandma Joyce is absolutely convinced that it was the energies of the Animal Healing Network that provided her those extra 2 years. This is one of our newer projects. It's called the TOS Meditative Action Network. You could think of it as a third healing network for situations in the world that need an infusion of light. So this is a way to be an activist and infuse difficult situations in the world with light. I am issuing an invitation to every single one of you or anybody who ever hears this to join the Meditative Action Network. You would do that by signing up for it at our website, theoservice.org. So at theoservice.org, that's the TOS national website, you can submit the names of people who need healing. You can submit the names of animals and their human caretakers who need healing, and you can sign up for the Meditative Action Network. The thing about this Meditative Action Network is we always just focus healing energy in the form of light in the situation. We never assume that we know what's best. We never ask for a specific outcome. No matter how sure we are that we're right, we never ask for a specific outcome, because if we could see the situation with higher vision, we might see we might see it from a different angle. So we just infuse it with light and we let the light do its work. It's kind of like the original smart energy. So that's what the National TOS has been up to. I want to show you just a smattering of local projects, just so you get an idea of the imagination and the diversity of the programs that the local groups have come up with over the years. This is pre-COVID, but the Milwaukee, Wisconsin Lodge for a number of years supported a women's shelter called Daystar. The way they did this is that Daystar, like a lot of charities, publishes a wish list online on their website online. And so the members would go and purchase as many of these wish list items as they can. They would take literally carloads of wish list items over to Daystar. They also raised money. I know one year they raised in excess of $500. So this was a really nice way of supporting this women's shelter. It's a place where women can go and have a safe place to be for 2 or 3 months while they figure out their next step. It's women who are escaping abusive situations. At our national center, the TSA's national center in Wheaten, Illinois, there is a study group called the TOS Dharma Group. They study Theosophy together, but then they put it into action. And here you might recognize HSP in the background of these photos. HSP is about a 10-minute drive from the National Center. And so lots of people who volunteer and work at the National Center go over and volunteer at HSP. So here you see them, again, packing bags of food that will be distributed to food insecure households. This is Paula Finnegan. She works at the National Center. This is John Kniebel. If you've spent any time at the National Center at all, you probably ran into John. He was kind of a pillar of volunteer support until he sadly passed away about a year ago. And John is very much missed. Portland, Oregon participated in a couple different programs over the years. One of them was called a backpack program, and I understand that there are backpack programs in most major cities, if not all. Think back when you were a kid and you'd get out of school Friday afternoon, right? And you were really excited for the weekend or a school holiday. Better yet, you were going to be out of school for a few days. But it's not a happy occasion for everybody, because with some kids, they're going home to food insecure households. So that means over the weekend or over the school holiday, they aren't going to have enough to eat, because the school breakfast program and lunch program was their main source of nutrition. So they and their siblings will not have enough to eat. These backpack programs are where volunteers purchase the backpacks, and they pack the backpacks full of food from a list that you're given by the program. They're given to schools, and then the school administrators can just discreetly hand a backpack to a child that they know needs it. Classmates don't need to know what's in the backpack. And so it's a way that a child can discreetly take home a backpack full of food to help them and their siblings get through the weekend or the school holiday. And so that's something, again, that is in most major cities. And it's something that's kind of fun, because you're actually doing something hands-on, and it's kind of fun to participate in that. They also put together hygiene kits for the homeless. These are 1-gallon Ziploc bags with things that a homeless person might appreciate, like a bottle of water, a couple of granola bars, maybe a fresh toothbrush and some toothpaste, fresh pair of socks. I know that the Houston group did that for a while as well. So for a while, we had a number of groups who were doing hygiene kits for the homeless. Salt Lake City had this fabulous idea. They participated in a community fair. I believe it was at the University of Utah, but anyway, a major university in Salt Lake City. You can see this was a huge display that they had, and they educated their community members on the dangers of plastic pollutions in the oceans. You've seen the lists of eat this, not that. Well, they had a section of this display dedicated to use this, not that. So they were educating people on alternatives to plastic products that we use in our homes every day without even thinking about it. Bradenton, Florida is a rather small study center, and they were looking for a new place pre-COVID to hold their meetings. They settled on renting a room at this place called the Maitreya Center. So they would meet in one of the Maitreya Center's rooms. And here you see them in kind of an open community room at the Maitreya Center. And the Maitreya Center had this library. The only problem was the library was a shambles. It was disorganized and it was a mess. So this member had a degree in library sciences, and he recruited some volunteers, and the 4 of them spent months whipping this library into shape for the Maitreya Center. When they got done with that, they took some old VHS tapes. For example, there were a lot of tapes that had Krishnamurti lectures, and they were going to digitize those so that they would be available to future generations. And finally, we come to Denver, the group that I'm part of. For us, it's all about the kids and the animals. In 2019, we did something kind of different. Normally, we support local shelters for dogs and cats. And it's really easy for people to get behind that because dogs and cats are just so darn cute. Everybody wants to help them. But in 2019, I floated a different idea. I floated the idea of supporting the Ironwood Pig Sanctuary near Tucson, Arizona. It's out in the desert. And people went wild for this. People came out of the woodwork wanting to donate blankets and comforters. Although it's hot during the day, especially during the summer in the desert, it's cold at night. And during the winter, it's really cold. And so pigs, even without opposable thumbs, have some kind of a talent for scrunching around somehow in these blankets and comforters, and they get themselves completely wrapped in the comforters. And so these pigs just absolutely adore their blankets and comforters. And I'm sorry, but I can't talk about this project without saying this. This project gave new meaning to pigs in a blanket. The people absolutely went bonkers for this project. In 2021, for example, we supported an organization called Warren Village. This is a local group that helps single parent families where the single parent is suffering from some manner of addiction. And because of that, the family has either experienced homelessness or they've been on the brink. And so if they are very serious about turning their lives around, they can be accepted into Warren Village. They get a nice apartment to live in and all the support they need of any kind that they need. If you need rehabilitation from your addiction, you're going to get it. If you need help writing a resume, you'll get it. If you need a ride to a job interview, you'll have it. If you need childcare before and after your part-time job, you will have it. They have an astounding 99% success rate. In other words, 99% of their participants do not lapse back into addiction and homelessness. Now, the thing about Warren Village is every year at Christmas time, Santa himself, with a lot of helpers, makes an appearance in person and hands out 2 gifts to every single child at Warren Village. And I'm telling you, that's a lot of kids. There are a lot of kids at Warren Village. And so every child gets 2 gifts, one practical gift and one fun gift. And we've had a lot of fun with this. Our study center secretary was actually the person in charge of the gift project at Warren Village. So we would sign up, pick a child's name and buy the gifts. We had a lot of fun with that. In 2021, we also did something kind of different. At that time, COVID was starting to recede just enough so that you felt comfortable getting together in an outdoor setting. So we got together in a park and we did a rock painting project. If you do this, you want acrylic paints and you want to bring some magic markers so that people can write messages on the rocks. It's easier to do with markers. But we got together, we painted these rocks with uplifting messages of brotherhood and unity. Then everybody took their rocks home to their neighborhoods and placed them on, hiking trails or dog walking trails where they knew people would find them, hopefully be delighted by them, be uplifted by them a little bit, maybe take them home and keep them. And I know the ones that I placed were picked up and kept. So at this point, I think that is the end of the PowerPoint. I think I'm going to stop sharing so that we can all come together again. And so that's what the TOS has been doing. And now the third point I said I was going to cover was, why would a person want to participate in the TOS? If you haven't been convinced as yet, I'm just going to remind you of this. We're going to go back to the letter from the master from the 1800s. That letter made 2 pretty grand promises. And one was, again, if you will persist, and the key is in the word persist, but if you will persistently put Theosophy into action every time you can in any way you can think of, 2 things happen. You reduce suffering in the world and you yourself make spiritual progress. The quest for spiritual progress is really a quest for freedom. It's spiritual freedom. It's freedom from the seemingly endless rounds of incarnation. But freedom isn't free, as they say. There is a price. And so the price for our spiritual freedom, our ticket out of the suffering that incarnation entails, is to do anything we can in the way of service with what we've got from where we are. In other words, it is to apply theosophical ideals, just to live them in our daily lives, to reduce the suffering wherever we can. And that is our ticket to spiritual freedom. I'm going to close with a really quick story, and bear with me because you will soon see how it is related to this talk. It won't be immediately obvious, but then you'll see. Every day when I leave work and I go to my car, on a coworker's car that parks next to me, I see a decal across the driver's side door of her car. And it says, "Shall we go, you and I, while we can?" And every day I read that decal, and every day it makes me smile, at least inwardly. And I was so intrigued by it that I hadn't heard of it before, so I looked it up. And I discovered that it is a lyric from a song called Dark Star. That's a Grateful Dead song. Some of you might be familiar with it. I was not. But I love this quote because, first of all, there's a statement of friendship, of warmth. Shall we go, you and I? It's not, I'm leaving on vacation, hold the fort, I'll see you later. No, it's, shall we go, you and I go together. So there's a very warm element of friendship to it. Next, there's the promise of adventure. We're going to go somewhere. Who doesn't love to, the idea of jumping in a car with a friend and just getting out and going somewhere? So there's that sense of adventure. And finally, there's a statement of urgency. While we can. We won't be an incarnation here in the thick of things forever. So whatever we can do, let's do it now while we can. And so I'm going to close with a question for all of you and an invitation. And that is, shall we make a difference, you and I, while we can? And now I'm going to open it to questions and discussion. So please feel free to unmute yourselves and let me know what's on your mind.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for a wonderful, informative talk. I loved it because you provided the history, and then you gave examples. And I'm so glad we picked that talk. So I'm inviting others to make a comment or ask a question. You can do this either by raising your hand or using the reaction button or just unmuting yourself. I have the participants list open, and I can and you can ask a question. What I want to say is I feel like I usually attend your sessions at the convention, but this was for me so much better and so much informative, and you are a wonderful president of the TOS. It just fits you perfectly. Does anybody have any go ahead, Rosie.
Thanks, Kathy. That was really wonderful. For the Pine Ridge, the Waldorf school, that's on Pine Ridge, right?
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, one of the really unique things about that school too is that they are teaching the kids their native language. Is
Yes.
that still the case?
Yes, that is the case. One of the concerns of the elders on Pine Ridge is that their native Lakota language is disappearing. And that's important to them because their spirituality is very much embedded in their language, as it is in Sanskrit. And so think about what that would be like for us if Sanskrit was disappearing from the face of the earth. That would be unthinkable. And so these kids are being taught their native language. They learn it every day in school. At least once a year, they put on a play in their native Lakota language. So the language will be revived and their spirituality will be kept alive through the language. That's an extremely important element. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah.
Thank you.
So one other question I have is about donations. So you can donate through your website. Do you have donation drives like the Theosophical Society has too, or how do you go about that? And
Yeah, so there will be a donation drive at some point during this year. We have not done it yet, but yes, there will be. We will be probably sending out a paper mailer to all TSA members. But certainly one way that you can keep up with what the TOS is doing is by signing up for our e-newsletter. It's called One Heart, and you can sign up for that at our website, theoservice.org. And always at the bottom of that newsletter or somewhere within the newsletter is going to be a link that will take you to the donation page. And again, you know, all TOS workers are volunteers, so nobody's getting paid. The donations are not being used to pay people. They are being used for the projects, and all of the projects are well vetted by the board.
Okay, excellent. Yes, there are comments here in the chat. Thanks, Cassie, for informative talks and for all you do. And then, yeah, that was it. Is there anybody else who has a comment or question? Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, Kathy, why don't you mention the present TOS meditation action project?
Oh yeah, I did cover that during the talk. The TOS Meditative Action Network is one of the newer initiatives. Again, basically it's an email list that you sign up for. You will get 1 or 2 email alerts every month, giving a situation in the world that needs light. There is suggested wording, and it's really quite brief. It's quite short. So you can do it once, you can do it every day as part of your meditation, once a week, whatever works for you, any time of the day. It's not synchronized. And so we just do what we can to send light to difficult situations in the world.
But the present one, you want to mention exact which area of the world we're sending light to?
Oh, well, the last one I sent was actually a day or 2 ago. And this was sending light to the Middle East because, as we all know, the situation is escalating. The situation between Israel and Iran is escalating, and that will not have a helpful effect for anybody, whether they are directly affected or not. It affects all of us. And so I just wanted light to be sent to every citizen and every leader in Iran and Israel to just flood the whole area and all the people with light. That's truly all we need to do. The light will know what to do. The light will know what's best.
Yes, and I personally have found those helpful because I have even used it at our face-to-face meetings. And at one particular time, we have used it at our secret doctrine discussion because a lot of people were upset what is going on. Patricia Munoz said, many thanks, Kathy, for your very informative talk. Every lodge should have a TOS project to support TS objects. Yes, and I think that is a good point. Our lodge supports the Joseph's House in Washington, D.C. that was founded by a doctor who helped during the AIDS crisis and took patients who were dying in. And now we don't have that many AIDS patients anymore. So basically they are taking in people who are on the street and who suffer from homelessness and have some illnesses. But and we once years ago visited, Rosie Vlatka and other members were there, visited the house to get information. And since then we have been supporting them. But what is wonderful is sometimes you hear that somebody has survived. That means they came in to die, but then they were, they saw all this positive energy and they were able to leave healthy. Rachel, go ahead.
Hi, good morning, all. I'm so happy to be a part of this discussion. In fact, I had just written an email to another associate going, why are these things not talked about in the society as much? Pretty much all the different aspects here, from the Meditative Action Network to the Healing Circle to, working in the community. I've been a member now for going on 3 years, and I receive 4 to 8 emails a month, and this is the first time I'm hearing about TOS. So for me, it's like, yes, we do have something, but why did it take so long to hear about it? So, Yeah, I would highly encourage the leaders to get together with the society leaders and make sure this is in the newsletters, this is in the announcements, that this healing group and meditative group, which is a very large wave of today's spiritual community online and sort of its raging comeback that's been, going strong since 2019, especially in 2020. We're the younger generation from 40 and below is forming all of their own societies and seeing a major insurgence in the Kabbalah and religion because there is a lack of what is the TS society and how are they engaging with us and these practices that we're doing within these large movements. And so, yeah, let's get in touch more.
Yeah, let's do. Yes. And please, if you're feeling like you're disconnected from the TOS, please do sign up for our e-newsletter, and then you'll get a newsletter every 2 or 3 months that talks about the latest projects. So you'll have inspiration coming to your email at least every 2 or 3 months.
Well, but I think, Rachel, you're making a good point. I think it's the responsibility of the lodge leaders to make sure that, and maybe that's something that we can bring up at the board meetings that we are, because there are wonderful projects that can be supported. But during the pandemic, there was a nice program that they connected some restaurants with the hospitals. And whoever had the time, they would try to, and the TOS paid for it. So all you had to do is go and say, I have an idea, I have a hospital, I have a restaurant, and they would pay for that. And so I thought that I loved that project. Is there any, I mean, this is not part of the TOS. I personally always felt that it should be part of the TOS, that the Theosophical Society mentors prisoners, and you can become a volunteer, and they have about 20, and Barbara Bear, the former president, and Laura, the administrative assistant, are now in charge of that program. But the TOS, is very important, all the things they do, because it's practical application of our teachings. Couldn't be more important. Rita, did you want to say something? Yes, go ahead. Oh, you're muted. You're not muted, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. So it must be your laptop. Sorry. You can put it in the chat. Okay. So I have one more message. Desiree said, thank you, Kathy. Great talk and helped me understand the TOS so much better. And Joan Hay said, thanks so very much for the wonderful talk. Love the fact we can sign up for the meditative light sending. And just for your information, because of the pandemic, we have a lot of members who from other lodges that attend the meetings. And so and if they can't attend, then very often I get emails of people who can't make it. That's why we record it and then put it on YouTube. Rita, you want to try it again? Okay. Will this be in YouTube? Yes, Rita, and I'm going to send out the recording afterwards. Don't you worry. I might make it public because, it is such a great advertisement, and then maybe other lodge leaders can mention that this is there. I love the movie you put together, Kathy. So innovative. That's wonderful. So anybody else? I don't see anybody else unmuted. So I want to thank you one more time for taking the time. This was so awesome. Do you have any final words you want to share with us?
One final thought, and that is that what I've shown you today is like the tiniest little ice shaving off the tip of the iceberg. I could have gone for hours and hours and hours with all the things that the TOS has done over the years. You got the tiniest little smattering of samples. And so please don't think that this is all that it's been doing. This is the tiniest little sampling.
Okay, thank you so much. And just a short announcement, I will be at the Mid-South next week, so Desiree is going to moderate the meetings, but I hope you will come. And Veronica is going to talk about artificial intelligence, and you will have a homework. I will send out the information soon. There is a recording that Veronica wants you to watch. And with that, have a fantastic weekend. Thank you again, and goodbye, everybody. Thank you, Kathy. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.